Hey guys, today we'll look at 7 strong lists for each detachment in the Space Marine Codex, and if you're looking to find some new advice or new ideas for your list, this video is for you. And yes, we're even going to talk about the 2 bad detachments in the Space Marine book, so without further ado, let's dive right in. First, we'll start with a personal favorite of mine, which is the Gladius Task Force detachment. It's the most tactically versatile detachment that pretty much makes everything that you connect it to better. Here's what I propose for a strong Gladius list. First, we obviously can't go past the Apothecary Biologist combo, and you can run this pretty much in 2 good ways. First is the one that I prefer, is the 6 aggressors with Boltstorm Gauntlets inside a Land Raider Redeemer with Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline. What Fire Discipline does, it essentially gives you critical hits on 5s and also gives sustained hits 1 ability to the squad. What you do then is you use 1 CP Storm of Fire stratagem, which gives you ignores cover ability and also AP1, extra AP1 if you are in Depth Doctrine. Obviously, the Biologist himself gives the squad lethal hits, so you essentially have just a bucket of dice, a generator of shots that gets extra AP, so you get AP1 or 2 depending on whether the target is the closest one. Aggressors do get extra AP just by shooting at something that is close. You're gonna ignore the cover if you've used the Storm of Fire, and you're gonna have lethal hits on 5s, meaning that you will be pretty much wounding anything in the game pretty well. The package of Land Raider gives them the durability and the delivery that they need, plus the aggressors also fight really well in combat thanks to their twin-linked gauntlets and a reasonable amount of attacks. The other option you can go for here is Eradicators, which they are also great. It's gonna be a purely anti-vehicle monster combo, but it's gonna do that job better than pretty much anything in the book nowadays, because you will get essentially 8 shots that gonna just blow up like crazy because you will be fishing for 5s and 6s, and then you're gonna be automatically wounding on 5s and 6s and re-rolling obviously all the hit rolls, all the wound rolls, all the damage rolls, and that is a very strong combo if you really want to have a reliable way to deal with a heavy monster vehicle. In this case, I went for the first combo option. The next unit we have is 10-man Assault Intercessor Squad. I've already talked a lot about why I love these guys. They are very versatile. They have a ton of attacks. They get full rerolls to wound on an objective thanks to the Honor the Chapter stratagem, which is one of the best strategies in the entire Space Marine Codex, in my opinion, because you get Lance, which is a great rule, +1 to wound on a charge, and also you get +1 AP. And AP is something that very few things in the Codex nowadays give, so that's a very good thing to have. Really necessary for the Assault Intercessors to do what they will be doing in Gladius, which is punching way above their weight. Just, you cannot really beat these guys for 150 points, no matter what you say to me. I'm pretty sure that they are one of the most, if not the most, points efficient things in the Space Marine book. If you take into account that whenever you want, you can also advance and charge them, meaning that they will also get the great mobility. You can also fall back and charge them for the same reason because of doctrines. They just become the absolute ultimate weapon, in my opinion. Obviously, considering that it's just a 15 points per model unit of battle line, we're not asking too much from them. Next, apart from the aggressors, which we already talked about, we have the Blade Guard Veteran Squad. And Blade Guard are a similar situation to the Assault Intercessors, in my opinion. Their big problem outside of Gladius is the lack of strength or modifiers of wounds, because their swords are the same strength 5, AP2, damage 2 that they were in previous edition. No, they're AP3, they were AP3, but it doesn't matter, the same strength 5, and that means that they're going to be having problems wounding pretty much anything that is mid to high toughness, and we need them to be able to do that, where it actually, the detachment solves that problem with Honor the Chapter, because whenever you need to fight a very tough thing, it's unlikely that you're going to need that in 2 places at once. It can happen, but you're going to be able to deal with that with your other resources, and you will be able to choose either to use the 1 CP +1 to wound on the Assault Intercessors or the Blade Guard, wherever that is going to be more efficient. Plus, they get a bit more flexibility because they get reroll 1s to hit innately or reroll 1s to saves thanks to their ability. So they are a nice extra option for melee in the army, and they are very, very cheap, so you're not spending too much points on them, and they're reasonably durable. Next one is, just for points sake, I have a 90 points 3-man Blade Guard Veteran Squad. It's still a good unit as a 3-man. You're probably not gonna spend 1 CP on Honor the Chapter for a 3-man, but in at the end of the game, just maybe in a very important moment, you can actually still use that stratagem there. For example, if your other Blade Guard unit is dead, if the Assault Intercessors are dead and they are all you have this one small squad for endgame, which might do a lot for you. Next is a 6-man Plasma Inceptor squad. The Inceptors are a staple of pretty much any Space Marine unit nowadays, Space Marine lists nowadays, sorry, because they get something that no other unit has, which is the mobility to actually deliver the shooting to wherever you want on the board. They combine the 3-inch dip strike with awesome firepower, giving you some incredible flexibility. You can also use them to block things from coming from transports. Just get into units that your opponent has no way of stopping you from getting to, thanks to Inceptors, unless they have just 30 infiltrators or something like that. And they're very efficient thanks to Twin Links, so if you have any kind of modifiers, like for example the wonderful Storm of Fire, which also works on them obviously, so you can ignore cover and get extra AP, which will help tremendously for the Assault Bolters and the Plasmas as well. They will be AP 4. You can even put them on top of a building so that they get plunging fire for extra AP, and with Twin Linked Pistol, that is just a crazy combination. So they pretty much solve your anti-elite, anti-horde problems. Assault Bolters more like anti-infantry and hordes. The Plasmas are more for the vehicles, monsters, and elites. 5-man Scout Squad next. Obviously, Scouts are great, with the cheapest unit that has mobility you can go for, and they just do what the small chaff units really need to be doing in any Space Marine list. In any list, so in general, they can essentially teleport around for free, coming from strategic reserves. They are cheap, they have 2 wounds each and 4+ save, so they're not incredibly easy to kill, they're just relatively easy to kill. They are a staple of any list, you should have them pretty much anywhere. Next, the vehicles. I've chosen the Gladiator Lancers because the Lancers, as we talked a lot about on this channel, they are very universally good. They will solve the problem of heavy monsters and vehicles for you, and they will do it from a distance, so you don't have to move up close, and you can just engage your opponent from far from your deployment zone, essentially, if you find angles. Few things can do that in the Space Marine book, fewer things still can do that as efficiently as the Lancer, so 160 points is a very fair price, and ought to include for some lists, in my opinion. Lastly, the Land Raider Redeemer. We already talked about this guy. Just a brilliant transport, very durable, incredible Overwatch capability, and just a crazy good thing to deliver your melee/shooting infantry into the fray. And lastly, the Calidus Assassin, of course, a great way to give your army mobility. We only have in this list a 5-man Scout Squad and a 3-man Blade Guard Veteran Squad for our sort of tactical duties, so Calidus was necessary because we need to have some things to throw around. The big units are not supposed to be the only way you capture objectives. As always, if you're looking for help building your roster or your collection, check out the links to my Patreon in the description because I provide personal assistance for that there. Next one is the first bad detachment that we have in the Space Marine book. Unfortunately, Anvil Siege Force is just a hard pill to swallow. What you get here as a detachment rule is all guns that your Adeptus Astartes are equipped with get heavy, which is +1 to hit when you stay stationary. And if you had this ability already and you stay stationary, you also get +1 to wound. You add +1 to the wound roll, which +1 to the wound roll army-wide sounds majestic, but the problem is the criteria are extremely harsh. What we want to be doing is moving around the board, being as mobile as possible, and this detachment pretty much wants us to do the opposite. That means that you will have some problems capturing objectives, you'll have problems with being predictable, because some things your opponent will just know, oh, he's not gonna want to go and move from that spot, so I can essentially plan as if that unit is a stationary target. Well, I tried my best to try to mitigate the problems of this detachment, which is, here in this case, the detachment is not complementing the list, it's the list who's trying to survive the problems of the detachment, and somehow come out on top. First thing we have here is just a Primaris, so regular captain, which it is called now, with Architect of War enhancement. What this enhancement does, it gives the bearer's unit ignores cover ability. And you might think, which unit would we want to attach this captain? A good question. It's going to be a unit of 10 Hellblasters. Why Hellblasters is, first of all, we have access to 2 CP stratagem, which is called No Threat to Great, which gives our Adeptus Astartes unit ability to reroll wound rolls against monsters and vehicles. With strength 9, that is pretty much exactly what Hellblasters lack to be very efficient against any monster and vehicle target, because they're going to be wounding anything on 5s anyways, and wounding on 5s with a lot of shots with rerolls is good. And why we want a captain with them is because the No Threat to Great is a battle tactic stratagem, so we would be able to save up those 2 CPs, because paying them ourselves would be just a nightmare. And Architect of War helps them to actually punch through the armor, because yes, they have high AP, but cover would have been helpful for the vehicles and monsters, and we are mitigating that. We also have a great strat called Battle Drill Recall for them, which gives them sustain hits 1, so if you get Oath onto the target that they're shooting at, it's going to be much easier for you to actually deal critical damage. And also, if they stay stationary, you will be getting critical hits on 5s. It would be a perfect combination with the Lieutenant. Problem is that I don't think that you will be often standing still with these guys, considering especially that you want to transport with them, so they're probably coming out from this transport, then shooting, and you are unlikely to have enough targets or be alive there to actually use them again remaining stationary. Next is the Chaplain and Terminator armor with Relic Shield and enhancement called Stoic Defender, which sounds very Imperial Fist to me, and I like the name. What it does is Feel No Pain 6+ for the bearer's unit, whilst they are in range of an objective marker. So it's okay, it's good. 6+ Feel No Pain for a unit of shield Terminators is a way to actually really help them against damage to threats, hence why we have a 10-man Terminator Assault unit. And Chaplain obviously helps them to punch normally, as they should be punching normally against some vehicle monster targets that are higher toughness, than their strength 8. There is also some synergy with the Terminator unit because of Rigid Discipline stratagem, which is 1 CP strategic ploy 1, where you get to fall back up to 6 inches when that's the end of the fight phase. And you can do that when you get into the range of an objective, so you get a bit more mobility with those Terminators. Plus, to further enhance their ability to keep the objectives for themselves, we also have the good one, not one backwards step, which is getting them double the OC when they are within range of an objective marker, so that some battle line cheap units are not capable of stealing it as easily from us. Next, we obviously have a 5-man Intercessor squad that's just for holding our home objective, and the sticky objective rule, as we talked a lot about on the channel, gives you a bit more bang for your buck for this one squad, allowing you to sometimes move them from one objective to another without actually sacrificing that first objective. 5-man Scout Squad, already discussed why they're great. Next, obviously the Repulsor, that's for our 10-man Hellblaster squad with a captain, so that they can come out, shoot, and then potentially if something charges them, they can jump back into the Repulsor using its ability, and some anti-tank firepower as well. And next we have a pretty unusual combination, which I think is interesting and might possibly work, but don't quote me on that, which is 3 Whirlwinds. That is a logical choice, considering that they would get heavy, so they would mitigate the 1/2 of the indirect fire penalty, and they are actually something that can stay stationary all the game. Unfortunately, they don't have heavy inbuilt, which that would be a great combination, because then they would get +1 to wound, but at least they're going to be hitting on 3s normally. And we have 2 Storm Speeders, the Hail Strike and the Thunder Strike. The Hail Strike there is for extra AP, and Thunder Strike is there for +1 to wound. As you can imagine, the idea here is that we triangulate the Storm Speeders onto a unit, some unit that we want to destroy. That unit then is extra AP and +1 to wound for our Whirlwinds, and then we put Oath on that, and we try to do maximum damage to them, potentially maybe even adding some Hellblasters to that. I think this combination can actually do quite a lot of damage. Not sure how much it is worth the probably quarter, if not more, of the army. That is not extremely efficient, probably, but I think it is interesting at least. I think this list can be called strong and it can be played well and can be a tough thing to beat, so I think it qualifies. Next we have the Stormlands Task Force Detachment and the list that you might recall from my Stormlands Task Force How to Play video. Here we're trying to do our best to use the Space Wolves units in conjunction with the Stormlands Task Force Detachment, which that detachment gives us advance and charge and fallback and charge capabilities, so we're trying to use that to our maximum advantage. For that we're using the Space Wolves units because the Wolves have a lot of good cavalry, which does really need the advance and charge to be efficient, and they also have great characters in addition to those wolves, which we can utilize. I'm not gonna go too deep into the characters themselves, just running through them. Bjorn the Hellmann is a great anchor unit, which is extremely durable and a nice piece to have in your back pocket. Herald Deathwolf helps the cavalry with the problem of AP. They have AP 1 only, and he gives them death wounds, so trying to bypass the save. Logan Grimnar is just a really good bit stick character. He also gives the army full rerolls to hit, and also rerolls for the charges once per game, so he is a nice buffing one as well, and you can attach him in addition to a lieutenant or a battle leader as it's called here. You can attach him to another 6-man Thunder Cavalry unit, adding the critical lethality I should say to the unit, because he gets damage 3 and up to damage 4 with his axe. We have a bunch of Fenrisian wolves with cyber wolves to just drown the board in our models. They cannot hold objectives, but they can be a very big pain in the belt because they can move block your opponent and just cause all sorts of havoc. Considering they can scout, they have a high move characteristic, they can also advance and charge, so they will spread around the board very quickly. Next we have a Wolfguard battle leader on a Thunderwolf with Hunter's Instincts enhancement. That's the one that gives us ability to come back from reserves one turn earlier, so you can put these guys into strategic reserves and come from the edge of the board on turn 1. You can even combine that with rapid ingress. If your opponent goes first, then you use that in their movement phase. At the end of their movement phase, come from the rapid ingress and then charge them in your turn. And obviously the battle leader himself is a great punchy character. Wolflord on the Thunderwolf here has the Fury of the Storm enhancement, which gives him just more melee capability, and the Wolflord himself has ability that gives the Thunderwolves +1 to the advance and charge rolls. So you can do something like a 6-man Thunderwolf cavalry unit with a Wolflord that gives them +1 to the charge roll, so you put them in the reserves, then they come from reserves on turn 1 and they charge on an 8. Obviously 3 6-man Thunderwolf cavalry units because they are great for this detachment and they really need it. And the detachment, funny enough, needs them as well because the shock assault, for example, stratagem, which gives them a lance and reroll charges, only works for mounted units, and Space Marines don't have any good mounted units for melee apart from the wolves. That's why we're using this detachment pretty much strictly with the wolves. And we have 3 Gladiator Lancers because of reasons I've mentioned before. Next is the Vanguard Spearhead. They give you the Shadow Master's ability, which gives you -1 to hit and cover when the opponent is shooting at you from outside of 12. Another reason why you run them is the Blade-Driven Deep enhancement, which will be present in every Vanguard Spearhead list that you see, and that gives a infantry unit Infiltrator's ability. And what we want to do is find a unit that is durable, fast, and deadly in combat. It needs to be durable so that it can last longer because you're investing a lot of points in it, indubitably. Then you also need it to be fast, because even though you're going to be starting from 9 inches away from the opponent's deployment zone, that's still 9-inch distance to anything in their army, so which you need to cross and then charge. And lastly, obviously melee, you need it because you need to do damage with that unit. There are certain good options for that. We talked a lot about that in the Vanguard Spearhead, how to play Vanguard Spearhead and Raven Guard video, which check out that one if you're interested in a more detailed analysis. But in general, the best one we can go for is Marinus Calgar with Aggressors, because they can shoot, they are durable, and they are also very good in melee. Plus, obviously, Apothecary Biologist, because you need someone to actually carry the enhancement. So I have Lieutenant with a combi weapon here, because he's a great lone up that gives us reroll ones to wound on a certain objective against units, enemy units that are on that objective. In No Man's Land, you choose that before the game, at the start of the game, I should say. And also we have Inceptors, usual suspects, we've already discussed them. Infiltrators, because they do great infiltrator things like protecting our deployment zone from dip strikes. Scouts, because scouts. Gladiator Lancers, we've already talked about them. And my favorite Redemptors, because they're tough, they're durable, they have good shooting, they're good in melee, so why not? Stratagems that you really need to remember here are Strike from the Shadows, which you will be using on your Inceptors, giving them +1 AP, and Ballistic skill when they are shooting from more than 12 inches away. It's a bit tricky with Inceptors because you want them to actually use their 3-inch dip strike ability, so they would need to dip strike within 3 inches and then shoot at something that is further away than the thing that they dip strike close to, but it doesn't really matter because it's still a great stratagem. Another great one to remember is Calculated Feint for your infantry units. It's a 6-inch move for any Scouts of Phobos, or D6 for any other infantry, Astartes infantry unit, and you can make that move when your opponent, just after they declare a charge. So it's a good protection for your Apothecary Biologist unit, for example. If your opponent goes first and you really need them to get out of dodge. Next, we have the Firestorm Assault Force Detachment. This one is all about flame, melta, and transports. Your ranged weapons will get assault here, so you get a bit more mobility, being able to advance and shoot. And also, when you're attacking something that is within 12 of you, so something like Melta or Flame, will get +1 to the strength characteristic. What are we trying to build around here? Obviously, transports and Flame and Melta, as I said, so we're looking at Aggressors, Eradicators, and Infernus Squad. Aggressors because they get Flamestorm Gauntlets and they fit really nicely into Land Raider Redeemer, which was just built, made, and created for this detachment. 10-man Infernus Squad is also great because with the 2CP Immolation Protocol stratagem that you can enact, they will get devastating wounds, and if you just point them at anything, they will melt it. Especially if you were to have a Vulcan Hestan in your army, allowing them to reroll wound rolls, which I don't have Vulcan on the slide here, but it is in this list. It's calculated into the 2000 points. And aggressors, they reroll innately, so you can use the 2CP Immolation Protocols on both units thanks to Captain and Gravis Army, which is going to be traveling with aggressors, so you can use 2CP Immolation on them first and then actually spend the 2CP on the Infernus Squad. Also have a bunch of transport related stratagems here, like the Rapid Embarkation one, which allows you at the end of the fight phase your Adeptus Astartes infantry unit that is wholly within 6 of the transport to embark into that transport. Or we also have the Burning Vengeance one, that is a cool name, where something shoots at your transport, you can disembark with your infantry unit and shoot back at them. So imagine that with the aggressors. That would be a very unpleasant day for whoever shot the Redeemer. Also, don't forget about the incredible Crucible of Battle stratagem, which allows your infantry unit to get +1 to wound. That works both in melee and in shooting, but in shooting only if you're attacking the closest eligible target within 6 inches of you, so very, very close fire. And we also have a 10-man Hellblaster squad here, which is going to be traveling in a repulsor, just as the Eradicators, 6-man Eradicator squad is also going to be in a repulsor. Hellblasters are quite good here in a repulsor because you can get the Champion of Humanity enhancement on an Apothecary with them, which that gives them ignoring all modifiers, which the worst modifier for them is -1 damage. You are going to be ignoring that as well. It's pretty much one of the best enhancements in the book, and it is also extremely cheap, only 10 points. We also have a 10-man Assault Intercessor squad here. You can, if you want to, you can put that into the repulsor instead of the Eradicators and putting them into the strategic reserves. That also works because from the strategic reserves it'll be easier for you to actually get into the 12-inch range for some targets, but you can use this list in multiple ways. Now the Ironstorm Spearhead detachment, which is the vehicle/dreadnought one. You get 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, or 1 damage roll for your army, so you want a lot of high quality and a lot of separate units here to be utilizing that reroll. You also must have some Tech Marines here because we have a great Tech Marine only enhancement. First one is lethal hits for all vehicles within 6. That just purely wonderful. And another Tech Marine one is once per battle round, when a saving throw was failed for a vehicle within 6 of the bearer, you get to ignore the damage or change it to 0. That won't help you against things like Melta that much, because you first change it to 0, then you add the 6 or however many the Melta does, but for anything else, that is just wonderful. And another great one is Master of the Machine War. That is Adeptus Astartes model only, so it doesn't have to be a Tech Marine, which we have all 3 enhancements here in the list, and you should have as well. And that gives your vehicles ability to shoot when they fall back and when they advance, which solves a lot of problems for the slower vehicles we have in the list. Talking about that, for the characters we have Lieutenant with a combi weapon and 2 Tech Marines with the enhancements I just mentioned. For infantry, you have Infiltrator Squad to keep us safe from the dip strikes, and Scout Squads because Scout Squads. And we have for vehicles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vehicles, which 2 Ballistas Dreadnoughts, they're simply here for shooting. They are a good platform in general, and with rerolls you get in the Ironstorm plus the lethal hits, they become very, very reliable and efficient, considering they also get reroll hits innately. And Redemptor Dreadnoughts, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with plasma cannons. The plasma cannons really like the lethal hits, and they also really like being able to advance and shoot, because Redemptors are a multi-role thing, so they want to be shooting and charging, and being able to first turn advance and shoot, and then the second turn move and charge is great. We also have the Vindicator here, which it really loves the rerolls, because without them the amount of shots you have is great, but you do have some lack of reliability, because d6 damage, d6 plus 3 shots, and even though they're strength 14, it's still possible for you to not roll a 3 or a 2 to wound. Best part is the Master of the Machine War, allowing you to actually advance the thing, the Vindicator, so you can bypass the 9-inch move that it has. So pretty much any vehicle in the Space Marine book you can imagine is going to be enhanced incredibly by the Ironstorm Spearhead. We talked about that in detail in my Ironstorm Spearhead how to play video. Just a basic example, the Mercy's Weakness Stratagem, which that is for 1 Adeptus Astartes unit from your army in your shooting or fight phase, so you can use that on the Redemptor, for example, in the fight phase as well, and that gives you sustained hits 1 if you're attacking something that is below starting strength, and when making such an attack, a vehicle unit, which you should be using that on a vehicle unit, will get unmodified hit rolls of 5 will be critical hits. So imagine using that on something like Gladiator Reaper, for example. It's gonna have sustained 2 on the Onslaught Gatling Cannon against infantry, and sustained hit 1 against anything else, and you're gonna just drown your opponent in the devastating wounds. And after your Redemptor Dreadnought has just like a crazy madman ran into the opponent's lines and charged and killed things with the plasma, you can then use 1 CP Vengeful Animus to explode the thing in the face of your opponent for just, again, 1 CP. Or you can use Power of the Machine Spirit if something is attacking your vehicle like Vindicator and brings it down to below half strength, so they almost killed the thing, but before they can finish it off, you can use it to shoot back at whatever was shooting you. Isn't that wonderful? And lastly, the 1st Company Task Force, the 2nd bad detachment we have in the book. Why it's bad is because it gives us the 1 turn of good Oath of Moment we used to have in the very beginning of Space Marine Index, and it gives it to us as a detachment rule just once in the game. So you can have 1 turn of old Oath of Moment, and that's it. That's all you're gonna get. I don't know who was writing this, but whoever was writing this did not really read the Gladius Detachment, for example, before they wrote the rules for this one, because it doesn't make any sense. The only good things we have in this detachment are the legendary Fortitude 1 CP stratagem, which is a battle tactic one, which gives your Terminator, Blade Guard, or Stern Guard, or Vanguard, so this is obviously all about the 1st company, gives them -1 damage, which that is a very powerful modifier, don't get me wrong, but just it's literally the only good thing we have in this detachment. Really good thing. We have a decent Orbital Teleportarium stratagem, which is just removing your Terminator from the board and putting it back into reserves. That is nice, but not something incredible. We also have Sticky Objectives for 1 CP stratagem, which again, that is a useful thing, but not nearly as efficient as the Gladius, for example. And the stratagem that is supposed to make our melee better is sort of weird, because it gives us +1 to hit, but it gives us +1 to wound as well. well only if the unit itself is below half strength. So when it's almost dead, very hard to actually use it. So here is what I came up with. I wanted to try and build a list around 2 very tough to kill Terminator bricks, and for that we needed a chaplain and a captain. The reason we have a captain is because we want to use the legendary fortitude twice in the same round, so that they cannot bait the -1 damage from us, so we can protect both Terminator units at once. The one that has a chaplain in it also has the Iron Resolve enhancement, which gives the bearer 5+ Feel No Pain, but once per battle you can get 5+ Feel No Pain on the unit itself. Black Templars get it for the entire game always, which I have some questions again to the detachment. And the second one, the captain gets the Imperium Sword, which is +1 to his attacks, or +1 to the, you guessed it, entire unit's attacks once per battle. And in addition to that, we have a 6-man Blade Guard veteran squad with a chaplain. Chaplain helps them to solve the issue of low strength. They are not gonna get much better than that because it's not Gladius, so we can get +1 to wound. We cannot get, well, we can get +1 to wound, but only if it's like a 2-man Blade Guard unit, which you at that point probably not gonna waste the CP. At least we can get +1 to hit from Heroes of the Chapter and -1 damage for Legendary Fortitude if our Terminators for some reason are not being shot, or maybe they're dead already. The Scout Squads for Scout Squad reasons, and 2 Gladiator Lancers to support us with firepower. Obviously 2 3-man Inceptor Squads as well, those will be helping us to deal with lighter stuff, and an Inquisitorial Henchman unit with a Mystic, and Mystic does essentially the same thing as Infiltrators, but just for this one model, so helps us to prevent dip strikes within 6 inches of the Mystic model inside the Inquisitorial Henchman unit. So is this list strong? I'm not sure, to be honest, but it's probably the best or close to the best that you can build with the 1st Company Task Force, and if you think otherwise, please prove me wrong and send me a better list, because I'm desperate here. So, what do you think about my top 7 strong list builds for Space Marines? If you have a better idea for a list, please let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear that. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.